Conciseness isn't just about getting the words right. It's about being psychologically strong. The stronger you are psychologically, the more confident and present you will feel in the room. And the ability to feel confident and stay present is the most powerful way to be not just concise, but to be persuasive and compelling and to speak in a way that has people really respecting your credibility as a leader.
Welcome to The Art of Speaking Up, a podcast that helps professional women access the limitless potential that lies within them. I'm your host, Jessica Guzik, and my mission is to help you find that spark inside you that has the power to transform your career in ways you may not have thought possible. I'm so excited that you're here. And now, on to the show.
Welcome to the podcast. Thank you so much for tuning in. Today's episode is all about helping you sound concise when you speak. When you are able to deliver your message in a way that is tight and polished, it will land better with your audience, and you will also walk away feeling more confident about how you showed up in the room. In the spirit of conciseness, I'm going to dive right into the meat of today's episode. I will be sharing 9 tips to help you be concise. The first 5 tips are tactical communication tips, and the remaining 4 tips are mindset and psychological tips, because one thing that you will likely be surprised to learn in today's episode is that conciseness is often a side effect of feeling clear, focused, and confident psychologically. This is why I'm covering the tactics as well as the psychological component. Let's dive right in with the tactical tips. Tip number 1 for being concise is to use headlines and stories when conveying information. So I want you to think about a newspaper. And if you are my age or older, then you probably remember having physical newspapers that you could pick up with your hand. What a concept. And I want you to think about how all of the articles in the newspaper had headlines. Now, I want you to imagine a newspaper that has no headlines. It just has articles. That would feel incredibly overwhelming. The headline is what gives us context that helps us understand the article in the newspaper, which makes it less overwhelming. When you're speaking, I want you to use high-level headlines to make the information that you are sharing more concise and less overwhelming to your audience. And when I say headline, all I mean is I want you to ask yourself, what is the big takeaway of what I'm about to share? And I want you to lead with that big takeaway before getting into the weeds. So here are a couple of examples of what that would sound like. You might say something like, I have a couple of suggestions that could save us time. Let me walk you through those. In this situation, you're leading with the big headline, which is that you have time-saving suggestions. This gives your audience that big picture context, and it makes you sound more concise. Another example is you might say something like, my main takeaway is that we need to pivot our strategy. Let me explain why I think this. Once again, you're starting with that big headline. This will help you land as crisp, and it gives you permission to now start to get into the details without coming across as too rambly or too wordy. So that's tip number 1. Tip number 2, this will change your career forever. Intentionally exclude information. I want you to flip from thinking, how can I share everything I need to share, to how can I share as little as possible and still get my message across? This is especially important when you are presenting information and you have time to think through the order and content of what you want to share with your audience. Typically, our mind is going to default to trying to include and cover everything. And when you're speaking to executives, you want to do the opposite and you want to ask yourself, what is the least amount of information that I can share while still helping them walk away with the key story? This helps you filter into only the highest impact pieces of information, which is going to result in a tighter story for your audience. Now, if you feel worried about excluding information, and if you're thinking, Jess, what if I leave out something that one of my stakeholders wants to hear about? A really elegant solution to help you navigate that is to show your stakeholders the high-level overview of everything involved in your work and then highlight for them the specific areas that you will be covering in that meeting. This will give them a comprehensive picture of what is being covered and what isn't being covered. And if they want more detail, they can ask you for it in the meeting. You can have some of those details in the appendix, and you can say something like, what you're looking at on this slide is an overview of everything that we've worked on this project. I'm going to be diving into these 3 specific areas, but if you all have appetite to dive into some of the others, let me know. We have that information in the appendix. This gives your audience the opportunity to ask for the information they need while also allowing you to stay out of the weeds and to boil your message down to something crisper and more concise. And that brings me to tip number 3, which is use structure. Structure is the magic key that takes information from feeling detailed and messy and unorganized to feeling elegant, sophisticated, and polished. Structure is one of the core communication skills that I teach inside my program because of how important it is. Now, when I say structure, all I mean is that when you are sharing information, you want to break it into parts. A great way to understand the value and importance of structure is to think about a restaurant menu. A restaurant menu is structured into appetizers and entrees and desserts. Now, I want you to imagine a restaurant menu that was not structured. It had no sections. And I want you to imagine that all of the dishes are just listed out in a random order. So you've got desserts and sides and main dishes and beverages all just mixed up in a list. That would be incredibly overwhelming. The structure is what makes the menu easy to take in and understand. And structure is exactly what you want to use to help your words and your communication sound crisp and concise. To apply structure, all you have to do is take the information that you are about to share and divide it into parts. Just like a restaurant menu is divided into appetizer, entree, desserts, side orders, you need to take your information and divide it up into your proverbial appetizer, entree, etc. So here's an example of what it would sound like to use structure. You might say something like, I wanted to share an update on phase 2 of our latest project. First, I'll walk you through the goal for phase 2. Then I'll explain the obstacle that we recently ran into. And finally, I'll share our proposed solution to that obstacle so that we can get your approval. As you can see in this example, I broke my information into parts. I broke it into appetizer, entree, dessert to make it easier for my audience to understand. This is going to help me sound more concise when I deliver the information. Now let's go to tip number 4. This is one of my favorites. Tip number 4 is to use what I call signpost phrases. A signpost phrase is a phrase that you use to signal to your audience what you are going to talk about next. They're called signpost phrases because they function like signposts. When you're on the freeway and you see those signs that are pointing you to the exits or to the freeway changeovers, those signs are essentially saying, if you go in this lane, here is where you will end up 1 mile from now. Those signs help the freeway operate without chaos because people know what to expect. When you are speaking, you can do the same exact thing. You can use phrases that effectively tell your audience, hey, here's where we're going. And this will create a sense of order and conciseness when you speak. So let me share a few examples of signpost phrases. One example would be you saying, first, I'll share the context with you, and then I'll walk you through the decision that we made. Another example is, I'll start by explaining the high-level goal before I walk you through the methodology. And one final example of a signpost phrase would be you saying, let me share my gut reaction first, and then we can explore if that feels like the right direction. These are all phrases that are signaling to your audience, hey, here's where I'm about to go. When your audience knows where you're headed, you will come off as more polished and concise. Just like when we have signposts in freeways and airports, they keep everyone moving in the right direction and they prevent chaos from ensuing. Let's move on to tip number 5. Tip number 5 is to use what I call the spill and sort framework. This is actually a version of signposting. So the spill and sort framework is where you say to your audience, first, I'm going to share my thought process, and then I'll talk through my recommendation. The reason that I call this spill and sort is because you're mimicking the process of spilling out the contents of a puzzle box and then sorting the puzzle pieces by color or by category. So if you ever did puzzles when you were younger or as an adult, I'm obsessed with puzzles. I do them quite a bit. You know that you start with like the spilling out and it's all chaotic and then you organize it. The spill and sort framework is one where you basically tell your audience, hey, I'm going to spill out some messy thoughts, but don't worry, I'm going to organize them and drive towards a recommendation. So when you use the spill and sort framework and you say, hey, first let me share my thought process and then I'll share my recommendation, you buy yourself permission to be a little bit messy and share some of your unstructured thoughts because you've warned your audience via that signpost phrase that you're going to do a brain dump. And when they know that the brain dump is coming and they know that eventually that brain dump is going to lead to a recommendation, you are going to appear more concise in their minds. And one broad takeaway that I want you to take away from all 5 of these tactical tips is that conciseness isn't always about you saying something in a way that's perfectly concise. It's about you knowing how to shape your audience's perception of you in a way that helps them view you as concise. This is important because in the corporate world, sometimes we have to share details. Sometimes we do have a lot of information that we need to share. So the name of the game isn't that you have to be the pithiest, most polished speaker on the planet. The name of the game is that you know how to strategically use these tools and phrases to appear concise and make things digestible for your audience, even when you do have a lot of information or messy ideas that you need to walk them through. Okay, we're going to take a quick break. And then when we come back from the break, I'm going to share tips number 6 through 9. These are all mindset tips. They are psychological tips. These are arguably more important and valuable than the tactical tips. So stick around and then we will dive in. If you are working on becoming a stronger communicator, you are going to love my free worksheet. It's called 5 Phrases to Help You Sound Like a Leader. This quick, printable worksheet will teach you 5 phrases that will help you sound crisp and sophisticated when you speak. For each phrase, I teach you how to use it, and I even offer mindset tips to help you feel confident and natural when you use these phrases. If you want to be seen as more of a leader because of how well you speak, this worksheet was created for you. You can grab it for free by clicking the link in the show notes or going to jessguzikcoaching.com/phrases. And now back to the episode. Okay, we are officially into the second part of today's episode. I'm pivoting away from tactical tips to mindset tips. Most people underestimate just how much their psychological state impacts how effectively they speak. You could have all the tools and frameworks in the world, but if you don't feel confident allowing your voice to be heard in the room, you are not going to be as effective as you can possibly be as a speaker. For that reason, I would be doing you a disservice if I only shared tactical tips and I didn't talk about the psychological component of speaking concisely. So let's dive in, starting with tip number 6. Don't judge yourself while you are speaking. A very common pattern that happens is you start speaking and you listen to the words as they come out of your mouth, and then you start judging them. And you start thinking things like, you don't sound good, this doesn't sound smart, why are you rambling? Why did you say it that way? People don't like this. And as these judgments arise within you, you begin to panic, you lose focus, you can't remember your train of thought, and this is when you start rambling. Now, the fascinating thing is the rambling didn't really begin until you started judging yourself. And so often, people don't realize that conciseness happens when we have the confidence to speak without that self-judgment. So tip number 6 is to try to be kind to yourself as you are speaking. And if you notice that you're having a lot of judgmental thoughts, try to temporarily disengage with those thoughts while you are speaking. I want you to think about it as putting those thoughts in a drawer and closing that drawer so that you can concentrate on your message. When I am working with my clients inside of my program, I spend so much time helping them let go of self-judgment because it is one of the most important psychological muscles to build if you want to be able to speak freely and confidently and concisely. Moving on to tip number 7. This is such a hard one, but such an important one. Get comfortable with silence. Rambling is often something that happens when we are finished speaking and then there is silence. We experience that silence as psychologically intolerable. And because of how uncomfortable it feels, we start to speak and ramble so that we can fill the silence and make our discomfort go away. Now, of course, this goes directly against the goal of being concise, which means that conciseness is a communication skill that requires emotional stamina. You have to have the emotional stamina to say something, stop speaking, let it be silent, and experience the discomfort that bubbles up without you having to say something to make the discomfort go away. This really links back to the point that I was making with tip number 6, which is that we think conciseness is about knowing the right tools and the right speaking frameworks, but really it's about having the internal psychological strength to take up space in the room and handle the scariness that comes with allowing your voice to be heard. Let's move on to tip number 8. This is one of my personal favorites. Get comfortable improvising on the spot. A lot of the women who I work with, when they first start working with me, they don't like having to think of what they're going to say on the spot. They really like to plan it in advance. The issue with this is there are so many situations in a professional setting where you don't have time to script. The conversation is moving along and you have to participate dynamically in the conversation. What I see happen a lot is because improvising feels so scary to people, they try to script what they're going to say even when they're in a fast-moving, dynamic conversation. And what happens is their attention is now split in 2 different directions. One part of their brain is trying to script what they're going to say and practice it. And the other part of their brain is trying to track where the conversation is going so that they can find an appropriate point to jump in. What happens then is you get overwhelmed trying to do all of this at once. You become more distracted, more flustered, and when you speak, it comes out even less concise than it would have come out if you would have just fully improvised on the spot. What I see to be true almost always is that embracing the improvisation usually allows you to be more concise than trying to script it concisely. I know that thinking on the spot and improvising can feel scary. And as someone who has spent many hours teaching this skill to my clients, I promise you it gets easier with practice, and it gets so much easier when you get better at not judging yourself and you allow yourself some permission to speak imperfectly. And that's not actually one of the tips on my list today, but it should be a tip. So let's call it tip number 8.5. Tip number 8.5 is release the pressure to sound perfect. I know this can feel so counterintuitive, but one of the biggest things that prevents you from being concise is thinking to yourself, I have to get it right. It has to be polished. It has to be concise. These thoughts create an enormous amount of psychological pressure, and psychological pressure never makes you more concise. It always makes you less concise. So ironically, in order to be concise, you have to release the pressure and tell yourself, I'm going to do it the best I can. And I trust that releasing the pressure is going to result in a much better message than me stressing myself out and building up all of this anxiety, trying to say it perfectly. And that brings me to the final tip, tip number 9, which is try to focus on the impact that you want to have in the room as opposed to focusing on yourself. Now, it is very normal and human to be focused on yourself when you are in the room. We all experience self-consciousness. We all have fears around potentially looking silly or stupid, and that can cause us to get overly focused on us. And that typically makes us less concise because instead of just staying focused on your message and the conversation and what you are there to accomplish for the business, your brain is now split in 2 directions, and half of you is focused on your message and what you want to say. But the other half of you is focused on how am I doing? How do I sound? Do I sound silly? If you can focus all of your mental energy on the message and the impact and what you're there to share and why you're in the room and what impact you want to create through your contribution, you will be able to be more present, more focused, and your words will naturally sound more concise. So my hope is that through these mindset tips, you are really starting to see that conciseness isn't just about getting the words right. It's about being psychologically strong. The stronger you are psychologically, the more confident and present you will feel in the room. And the ability to feel confident and stay present is the most powerful way to be not just concise, but to be persuasive and compelling and to speak in a way that has people really respecting your credibility as a leader. So I'm going to give you a rapid fire summary of the 9 tips for being concise. Here they are. Number 1, use headlines and stories. Number 2, intentionally exclude information. Number 3, use structure. Number 4, use signpost phrases. Number 5, use the spill and sort framework. Number 6, don't judge yourself while you are speaking. Number 7, get comfortable with silence. Number 8, get comfortable improvising. Number 8.5, bonus tip, release the pressure to sound perfect. And number 9, instead of focusing on yourself, try to focus on the impact that you want to have in the room. This brings us to the end of today's episode. Thank you so much for sticking with me. And if you want to work with me to elevate your communication skills so that people really see you as a leader, this is the work that I do inside of my signature program. And I would love to invite you to come join me in the next cohort. My program is called the Art of Speaking Up Academy. And inside this program, I support you with 2 important goals. Number 1, I teach you the tactics of executive communication so that you are able to speak at a leadership level. And number 2, I help you build inner confidence so that you are unafraid to take up space in the room and so that you have the psychological strength required to speak super effectively. Having a strong, compelling, concise voice at work is as much about feeling confident inside as it is about knowing the tactics of how to express yourself effectively. Inside the Art of Speaking Up Academy, I cover both the tactics and the inner work on building confidence so that you have the full package that you need to stand out and develop a reputation as a highly impactful leader. If you are ready to step into your next level of growth, I want to invite you to add yourself to the waitlist by clicking the link in the show notes or going to jessguzikcoaching.com/academy. When you join the waitlist, you will be first to find out when the next cohort is open, and you will also qualify for valuable waitlist-only bonuses. The bonuses rotate, but they can sometimes include a bonus workshop or even a bonus one-on-one session with me. I don't recommend skipping the waitlist. You can add yourself by clicking the link in the show notes or going to jessguzikcoaching.com/academy. Thank you so much for tuning in to today's episode, and I will catch you in the next one. Bye.